Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer, food maker, or artisan selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast.
I'm Kat Fields-White.
We're longtime farmers market managers, educators, and consultants. Get ready to catch up on all things farmers market pros with us.
Welcome back to Tent Talk. This season we'll be talking past tense and future tense, where farmers markets have been and where they're growing. We're focusing on the tried and true basics that still work and new systems and insights to make your market or market business stronger and less stressful. Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by Manage My Market, an online platform assisting markets in more than 30 states with vendor registration, stall assignments, and interactive map creation, invoicing, permit tracking, and more. For more information on how to consolidate all your market management tasks in one place and a free demo, click the Manage My Market logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com. Welcome back to Tent Talk, everyone. We're talking in this newest season about past tense and future tense. That means learning from what we and others have done before us and also uncovering and discussing new tools and information to help farmers markets and market businesses thrive and grow. The new Local Agricultural Market Program, or LAMP, grant applications just opened, including the 2026 FMPP, or Farmers Market Promotion Program. There's a very tight window for applications this year, with the June 5th deadline just a month away. My co-host Bridget Myers is off today, and I'm joined by Reza Djalal of the Adams County Farmers Market in historic Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Reza led his market's grant application last year and will share with us how the process went and what's next. Welcome, Reza.
Thank you so much, Kat. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. I'm really glad to have you. We'll start out just for our listeners with a quick recap. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience around farmers markets, maybe what you did right before that and how you got into farmers markets?
Sure. So I am the market manager for the Adams County Farmers Market in Gettysburg. Our market is about 18 years old, but I've been the market manager this is my 8th season, going into my 8th season. Our opening day was actually this past Saturday, and it was pretty successful despite year 9 of rainy opening days for us. My first experience with the FMPP program was in 2020. I worked with my board chair at the time, who had past experience with federal grants, and we worked together and collaborated, and somehow we proposed a project that was ultimately successful and ultimately funded. And it was a very successful experience, of quite a learning curve for me. But we closed that grant out after the 3-year grant period. And then I applied again in 2025, and I felt like my 2025 application was even stronger, much tighter, almost, I would say, my magnum opus of grant writing. If it wasn't successfully funded, I got a lot of good feedback, but the USDA did not fund that 2025 proposal, but I'm reworking it. I'm taking in feedback that we received from the USDA, and I'm hoping to apply again, as you said, with a little bit of a tight window, but I hope to apply again here in 2026.
Awesome. That's kind of a spoiler alert there. Yes, he applied. No, it didn't work this time. I'm interested, though, to hear about how the 2020 grant and the 2025 grant differed. What kind of project were you applying for in 2020?
Yes, great question. So in 2020, there was a lot of things in the works that needed to be addressed, but the central core of the grant was that we knew our existing market space was temporary. It was a parking lot that was slated for development, and then the development finally was approved, and a purchaser bought that parcel. And so it was time to pick up our stakes and find a new location. And so the 2020 FMPP grant was aimed at securing that new location, identifying the strongest possible venue, and then marketing that new location, and tangentially also continuing to build our capacity and build our infrastructure to make sure that we could continue to operate a successful market, even after the relocation was completed. And it worked. It was very successful. Our market is where it is today. largely because that grant surged us into a new state for our market, a much more competent and professional operation.
So is that considered a capacity building grant? I know they have a few categories of grants in the FMPP program.
That's the box that I clicked and it seemed to work out. Yes.
That's great. Do you remember how much that grant was for?
It was I might get the numbers a little bit off, but I think it was 96,000 over 3 years. So
Okay.
certainly on the smaller side of what some of the awards can be.
Yeah, some of the federal grants are really big. They go up, into the millions of dollars sometimes. But I think a lot of folks fall in the 300 to 500,000 kind of range. So yeah, that's a relatively small one. What was the grant amount on your 2025 grant
We
requested?
we requested 125, a little bit more over the course of 3 years. And and back to your other question, the focus of that grant differing from the 2020 grant was so the 2020 grant was successful. We identified a local community park as the prime ideal spot for our market. And lo and behold, it was extremely successful. Even this is kind of rare for farmers markets, is that I'm sure you know, we relocated and sales increased dramatically. And
We've
vendors,
seen that before, actually. We've moved a market one time, just about 4 blocks, but the 4 blocks it was still in the same neighborhood, but really shifted the tone. That neighborhood 4 block, that sub neighborhood 4 blocks away was just completely different. And we saw huge increases in sales. We try to remind people that sometimes moving's a good thing.
that's good wisdom, and I'm glad that it wasn't a unique experience to us. I was worried. I was worried because we had this downtown footprint in Gettysburg, and I was worried about going a little bit off the beaten path. But like you said, the vibe was so much nicer. There was much more seating and shade and restrooms available and vendor parking, more space for
Ooh,
vendors. Customer parking was a big deal. That also was largely, and again, these were all things that we identified through the process of administering the FMPP grant. So it was
awesome.
accessible that way too. But the point being that the 2020 grant helped us identify that location. And again, it was very successful, and our market has grown quite a bit. And then the 2025 proposal was, well, okay, now we found the new home that we want to be our forever home for the market. How do we take root in this location? There's so many possibilities at this park that are not being actualized. Not in the least, awareness in terms of marketing. Do people know that we're here? We're still kind of a hidden gem in the Gettysburg area and not a show-stopping agritourism destination that I would like us to be. And then there's so much potential for how do we work with the park to really develop all sorts of different programs and ideas that would make our market more successful. And that was the focus of the 2025 grant.
So did you work with a group to come up with the 2025 concept? And did you have partners in that program?
Yes. I mean, it was largely you might say a one-man show in terms of, writing it and piecing it all together. But the park itself was a big supporter, and they signed a letter of support for the grant and were willing to work with us if it was. I mean, they'll work with us even if it wasn't awarded, but they were willing to collaborate on the grant if it was awarded. We worked with Penn State Extension to again, if the grant had been awarded, it would have made it possible to do some regional networking, peer-to-peer education with other markets about sort of similar to what we're doing today is like, how do I get the word out about how other markets on a smaller scale can apply successfully for FMPP funding? Um, there's this really awesome, excellent consulting group that specializes in farmers markets. Maybe you've heard of them. And so a very kind-hearted person on that end was willing to support our application as well. So that I think really helped. And so yeah, there was a lot of people who pitched in, but I was the one sort of, obviously working through the document and putting it all together.
Yeah, we were really happy to join in that. We actually act as technical advisors on a number of FMPP grants. We don't apply for grants ourselves, but we're always happy to to work with folks that have gotten grant funding to help them spend that money and to achieve the goals of their projects. So that was gratifying to do. We were sorry when you didn't get the grant for many reasons. So it sounds like your grant was pretty focused on something that you just needed. So you weren't really looking at guidelines about the projects that USDA was prioritizing last year too much, right? I think some people craft their grant to what the USDA seems to be looking for as opposed to just what they need in that moment. Did you do much of that?
That's a good point. I think that you're right. I didn't investigate those details super thoroughly. It was more like a by the books, like, well, this is what you are defining as capacity building, and this is where it aligns with our needs. But yeah, I wouldn't say I was tapping into the zeitgeist of the moment in terms of what the USDA might be prioritizing in a more nuanced way.
Right. So this grant cycle, 2026 grant cycle that just opened, they've got more than $27 million to award, including to FMPP projects that they say, quote, develop, coordinate, and expand direct producer to consumer markets such as farmers markets, roadside stands, agritourism activities, community supported agriculture programs, or your CSAs, or online sales. And some of those categories were not traditionally included in the farmers market promotion program. I mean, hence the name, farmers market promotion, historically. But last year we saw relatively few farmers market organizations win awards. And the USDA had some really specific guidance a few years back to that they were prioritizing projects that concentrated on DEI and on equal access and more food access programs. The last couple of years, as we've seen people with grants terminated, they've actually gotten letters that say we're eliminating every project that was aimed at increasing DEI, increasing equitable access, that kind of thing. Your project was not so much aimed at that, but do you think any of those intentions were included in your project and that may have affected your grant awarding or not being awarded?
I think maybe not necessarily the opposite is true, but Kat, offline, I had shared the feedback that we had gotten from the
Right.
USDA, and in my view, my reading of it is that it we got a lot of positive remarks. It wasn't ultimately funded, but they said good things, and I think that part of it was that my hope was to use those funds. I didn't explicitly state that we were going to promote these programs or our offerings to for instance, vulnerable populations or increasing access to lower income families. But that was certainly like what I had hoped to accomplish in a broader marketing campaign that the project would have funded. Does that sort of answer your question? Am I making
Yeah, it does. And I think, I looked at your grant and then at the scorecard and things, and I feel like you, if not purposely, then inadvertently avoided using some of the key phrases that they were scanning for in a sad way. Um, but you did achieve the food access, which I think they seem to react positively to, that food access was a priority for them, just as long as you didn't have any intention of making that dependent on being a person who needed it for reasons of, person of color or any of those kind of populations. They have a kind of a different view right at the moment, as we all know.
I guess I would say maybe the secret sauce was if you really frame quote unquote vulnerable populations as consumers, and like we're not trying to help them, but we're trying to help them buy more stuff at our local produce from our local producers. I think that framing, I know it sounds kind of maybe
Now,
mean.
that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but with the ultimate overall intention of being the same, but like that angle is like, 'cause even for us, one data point that I found pretty interesting is that we do have a SNAP program. We're a SNAP authorized retailer, um, but far fewer than 1% of SNAP eligible shoppers have redeemed benefits at our farmers market. So
Interesting.
in our grant, I'm like, hey, there's a untapped, you might say, consumer market of 99% other SNAP shoppers who could be buying from our local producers, which is the point of this grant. So it's not about helping them. It is low key, but it's not about helping them. It's about driving more sales. Am I making? Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
That does make sense. And actually, it's a different way than I've thought about it. And I think that's interesting. I mean, the point of an FMPP grant, since it comes from USDA, is to assist the producers. And so assisting consumers, I guess, maybe in some ways should be just a side benefit. And so framing it so that you show the effects it'll have on the farmers to have those folks have SNAP funds available to buy. Interesting idea. And I think actually it makes so much sense. Did you use a professional grant writer at all, or was it all you?
All me, all
All
me.
you and just you, right? Did you have a team of people helping on that particular proposal, or that was you? I felt like.
So it was me. There's two components to this. One thing is that I maybe am kind of a little bit of a weirdo in the sense that I like to write grants. I was always the kid in high school who liked to write research papers. Like I find it engaging and fun. This is like my craft. This is like my art. So I know a lot of people don't go into this with that disposition. So that I think is one unique advantage. I like to, of all the fundraising components that I have to do for my position, grant writing is the only one that I actually like really enjoy. So that is kind of unusual, I think.
You're sort of a rare bird, Reza. I will say very few people that I talk to in the farmers market sector enjoy writing grants. They find the work to do it worth it on the basis of getting the money they need to do the projects they want. But I've very rarely heard anybody say, "Oh boy, get to write a grant app this week."
I really do like it. And then the other component, I do want to give a shout out to former board chair and founding member of the Adams County Farmers Market, is currently a woman named Kathy Glon. And she had written a successful FMPP grant even before my time, I think maybe in 2013 or 2014. And so she did not directly write this grant, but she has been willing to um, sort of review and advise and suggest and make edits through Google Docs and sort of be a sort of kind of like a grant consultant from the board member capacity that she has.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you have most of the information you needed at hand, or did you need to do kind of a preparatory period of accumulating data and looking for numbers?
Well, another thing that I think we do pretty well, I'm also, believe it or not, a very data focused.
Oh, I believe it.
So I think I had a lot of that just from our own, we have like an annual report that we do every year. So I pulled a lot of information that I needed from that, our SNAP redemption, other program redemption, um, a lot of the costs for different things that I wanted to build into the grant had already been things that I wanted and had looked into but couldn't afford. So I had some of those expenses outlined. Um, so it's a matter of revising and compiling and arranging in a way that is suits the format of the FMPP structure. Um, but I think I had most of that on hand. But yeah, if that's not if that's not something that a market manager or grant writer has at their fingertips, that I think that I could see that being a pretty big component of the preparatory process.
Yeah, we're trying to give people sort of a realistic view of do you have the capacity to apply for this grant this year, in particular when the grant application period is so narrow. It used to be traditionally, FMPP grants came out kind of mid-spring and they were due sort of end of summer kind of thing. This year, it's a 1 month window. So if you are not a person who accumulates data throughout the year, this could be a little bit tricky. You're going to need to really hustle to get this done. About how many hours or days or weeks did you devote to writing the grant application?
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember you had asked me that via email, and I was thinking about that question, and I think I figured it out. It took me almost exactly 40 hours. It was like
Okay.
one solid, complete work week to get it together. Um, I think it took me about 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks of a whole process to finish things, but condensed down, it was like one solid week of 8 hours a day getting it together. And that includes, reaching out to different stakeholders for letters of support. That includes doing drafts and having board members and grant committee members review it, and making revisions, and that also includes maybe something we should also talk about is the sort of the back end federal grant administration process also has a little there's some quirks, you might say, to that process. The interaction between grants.gov, sam.gov, and PMS all it once you're in it, it's not so bad, but getting to it can be a little bit of a challenge if you haven't been involved in those systems previously.
Yeah, and I'm wondering about that actually for folks that have not even applied before. You know, if you've gotten a grant before, that's a whole different thing. You're probably all set. But if you've never applied for this grant, you have to be registered with grant.gov to even submit your application and have those numbers. So that used to be a fairly efficient process. It went pretty quick. I know when we did it, it was not going quickly. It was during peak COVID time, and there was a lot going on. And I think it took us, I want to say, more than a month to even get our number, which would make this particular grant cycle not open to somebody who isn't at least at that point where they've gotten a number to be able to accept federal funds. So that's something that people should know. Was there any particular part of assembling the application that was the most time consuming or maybe not daunting for somebody like you that likes doing grant applications, but something that most folks might find the biggest challenge?
I mean, the bulk of the time that you'll spend outside of again, the network of grants.gov and sam.gov is developing the narrative. You get 35 pages. That's the max page limit for the FMPP uh, proposal. And yeah, I mean, it's like it is kind of like writing a research paper, and you have to really um, have in grant writing they call it a logic model. It's like you really want to have this leads into this, and this leads into this, and this leads into this, and it's writing that all out is time consuming. Not excessively if the grant is successful. It's worth the gain is worth the pain if it all pays off in the end. But yeah, that's the bulk of the time is writing that narrative out.
Yeah, and I think that probably takes a certain set of skills to do that. And I'm going to guess too that that's why organizations with less bandwidth or that may be very new in the farmers market arena have a hard time with that because you just don't have the language that the federal government expects to hear and the logic model that creates a path that they read through in the way that they're used to absorbing information. So there's a 25% match requirement, which can also be daunting for small organizations. How did you plan to fund that match?
That's a good question. Our We basically had two funding sources, which is that we were going to commit some of our own operating revenue, basically, that we have a bank account that has some money in it, and we're willing to say, here's X dollars that we already have that we'll commit to the project. And then we have a regular recurring sponsor who sponsors the market every year. Um, and that organization was willing to not only commit to the year-to-year support, but they were also willing to commit that if the grant is awarded, we're committing 3 years in advance, basically. So here's the grand total of um, of what we're willing to commit, and you can use that as the match. And so they wrote a letter of support, and then they also have to provide like some evidence of their bank statements for the application. So that could be, I mean, in a way, for even for a smaller market or a developing organization, that could almost be a an opportunity to cultivate a new relationship is that if you say, hey, this is the biggest pot of money available to any farmers market anywhere in the country. This is the crown jewel of farmers market funding, and we'd love to have your support. And you're not even on the hook unless the grant is awarded, really.
Hmm.
So would be willing to commit, let's say, $10,000 a year over the course of 3 years. And if you do this, this will be transformative for our community. This will be transformative for our market. And again, you're only obliged to provide those funds if the grant is awarded. So I think I can imagine a major sponsor or a big business or potentially a healthcare services organization um, might find that opportunity compelling if the organization is able to make those connections.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Banks, I think, at least in the past, were mandated to use a certain amount of money towards community development. That kind of fund could be good. Credit unions. Yeah, so there's some big players out there. I think I've seen other applicants kind of patching it together with this person will give this much and this person will or organization will give that much. In kind matching is also acceptable, right? So you can have people donate services or staff time that might be part of the project.
Yes, another good point is that we leveraged that heavily in the 2020 grant, which was again, that was the one that was actually successful. Is that we had a lot of in-kind services provided. It's hard to remember exactly now what we had built into it, but I think one of the things we had mentioned is that we had our CPA was willing to provide pro bono financial services, and that's pretty costly when it all adds up again over the course of 3 years. So having that chunk of in-kind support helped in that process.
Yeah, I know we've had grants that we supported with technical advice, mostly on the educational side when they're doing grants where they're training market managers or they're training producers to operate more successfully at farmers markets. And a lot of times we will provide X number of registrations to the Intense Conference, and that counts as a support in terms of matching. So there's a lot of ways to accumulate that and add it up, especially if you're working with a number of partners. And USDA seems to like grants that have partnerships involved. I think you get points for that.
Yes. In fact, I have a little quick tip that I learned from the last round that I think is worth people knowing that I'm certainly going to implement into my next application. Is that so you know, in the process, you're also able and sort of expected to provide letters of support and similarly letters of um, evidence of available infrastructure, evidence of critical infrastructure. I can't remember the exact term. And so we did get some letters of support that helped our application. And they do say that they don't want superfluous letters. Not just anyone who likes you will support it, or not like any random vendor who says we like this. That it has to be very tied to the project. So I took that too literally, and I got letters of support that directly related to the work plan of the project. And then after the fact, for instance, you have to list out who is going to be a key player in this. And I put myself, obviously, I'm the grant coordinator for this project coordinator. And, I should have written my own letter of support and included it. I did, you know what I mean? Like I was a part of the grant, but I didn't think I was a part of the grant that needed a letter of support. But
Oh,
they wanted us to have me to say I'm willing to do this, even though I said I was willing to do this on the. Yeah. So similarly, like we added our CPA again to the most recent proposal, who was again willing to do financial work for the farmers market, and I didn't get a letter of support from him. I thought it was kind of obvious, but no, I should have had him write a letter of support. So there, there's a happy medium. You don't want to have any old person who doesn't relate to the grant, but I could have had many more people write letters of support that I didn't tap into, not in the least myself, which is kind of funny, but I think it would have made a little bit of a difference for us.
yeah, interesting. Is there a limit to the number of letters of support you can get?
I don't think so. I
Huh.
don't think don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
I should have maybe put a disclaimer at the beginning that this is not
Yeah,
legal
yeah.
advice, and that's also not USDA sanctioned advice. This is just sort of my anecdotal information, but I don't think that there's a limit as long as it's not superfluous, unrelated to the grant itself.
Right. Love it. So you received a scorecard that you shared with me offline, and I find that really interesting. Did you have to request that document? Did they just give it to you when they declined your grant?
They just give it to you. I think that in the terms of the grant, they're actually obliged. Anyone who successfully applies, will get it, and they are mandated to provide that feedback.
That's interesting. I've talked to other people that did not get grants, but also didn't get much communication last year about whether or not they got grants. And that seems to have been somewhat unique for this last year. I think there was a lot of transition at USDA, and I'm not sure what fell through the cracks, but a number of people were surprised to hear that somebody had gotten a scorecard. I thought it was really helpful. I will have to say that I was very pleased to find that our organization, Farmers Market Pros, who had planned to act as a technical advisor here in a certain portion of the project, came up as strengths both the times they were mentioned and not weaknesses. Very relieved to see that. Were you, what kind of comments in that scorecard did you find helpful?
I found a lot of the comments helpful. Again, the letters of support thing was something I sort of inferred from the comments, and that's something I want to implement. Uh, Another thing that I found, it's frustrating. Like I said, this is my crown jewel grant. This is like the one I put the most work into. I was very proud of how it turned out, but there was one typographical error at the very end that I noticed after I submitted it, and they certainly noticed in their feedback. So I'm kicking myself kind of. So that also maybe another tip is to know that the the template that they provide is simply a Word document at the end of the day. There are cells and you have to fill in certain numbers, but it doesn't automatically populate and it doesn't automatically calculate. It's just a Word document. So it's very good to really comb through very, very finely to make sure that you're not doing any mathematical errors that would lead to someone questioning why it doesn't add up to what you think it should. So that's another tip. Yeah, I think I'm also want to lean heavily into the strengths that they identified. Yeah, they like the broad partnerships, not in the least Farmers Market Pros being on that list was really helpful. Um, they like the mention of Penn State Extension, and again, I think it's also helpful to delineate between a letter of support and the evidence of critical infrastructure. We also, again, it kind of seems so obvious, but I think it was a strength for us, is that we're at the park. We exist at the park, and so the park did provide a letter saying we are we the park are willing to have the farmers market here for the next 3 years. It seems so obvious, but they provided that, and again, it was identified as a strength.
I think there were some comments in there about you not saying what was going to happen if you didn't get the grant. I think it wasn't phrased exactly like that, but it was kind of there doesn't seem to be a plan B here if this, or there doesn't seem to be an inclusion of what could go wrong, which is something that you maybe commonly include in like a business plan when you're looking for funds, that kind of thing. I was kind of surprised that they mentioned that they would have wanted more of that included.
Yes, that is a comment that I remember. What they had said is I outlined our objectives, and there's a column in the template that asks what sort of challenges you expect to face, and I think I went into it not wanting to highlight the weaknesses or the liabilities because I didn't want it to be considered as problematic or something that they would might jeopardize the funding. But I think that maybe I was too it, I was intentionally doing this, but I was too optimistic in my outlook. Like, oh, it'll be fine. The challenges, if any, will be minimal. When really they would almost want a realistic erring on the side of scrutinizing challenges that you really think could happen. And now, again, going into it for 2026, I think I will take that to heart and be pretty forthcoming about what sort of challenges we might be experiencing in some of these aspects.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing that a venture capitalist expects from you. I would not have assumed that the federal government wanted to hear that, but I mean, I guess it makes sense. We are giving you a pile of money and expecting you to be realistic and innovative about how you spend it. Will you use the comments from last year to inform how you write this year's grant?
Oh yeah. Yes, definitely. I'm already reworking what we've done, and I'm already making these edits, and I'm going through the comments and basically going through and taking where they're identifying a weakness and then making that direct change. You can kind of intuit what in fact they even say they in some cases they list the page number that they're referring to. So you can almost go through one by one and make the change that they are sort of suggesting in their comments in the grant. It only kind of works if you're reworking a previously unfunded grant from basically the prior year. If there was 4 or 5 years in between, it probably wouldn't quite align so well. But in this case, it's working out for us.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I was actually very impressed by the scorecard that you shared about how helpful it would be for somebody, especially that didn't get a grant and was going to apply again. It really does give you a nice roadmap to go through. And I feel like that may be kind of a recent innovation. Do you remember getting scorecards from well, I guess you got your last grant, so you maybe wouldn't have gotten one.
Yeah, we did. We got it.
Oh, you did.
The
Interesting.
2020 grant, we did. And again, interestingly, I'm really glad we got that grant. It was transformative for our market, but the feedback we got from the 2020 grant, which was awarded, was much harsher and reflected a weaker application, like from their feedback. Um, the most recent grant and the scorecard that you're referring to has a lot of strengths listed, but that was the one that didn't get funded. It is kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Interesting, right? Yeah, maybe just a different tone from the grantors in this phase of our federal government's operation. Did you find the template itself intimidating? I mean, obviously you're a grant writing guy, so maybe you didn't, but I've heard that from other people.
Well, that's a good question. In 2020, the first time around, it was very headache inducing and very like difficult to comb through. I so that experience was hard because I was so unfamiliar and the terminology was so dense and it but that experience is what almost set me up to be very comfortable with it now. Yeah. So in that instance, it was a little bit frustrating, but and then because it was awarded and we worked through it for over 3 years, you keep constantly referring back to your work plan and you keep constantly looking at that document, and so that develops this familiarity with the template. And then so now I see much more clearly doing it again in 2025 and 2026. Oh, this is how this is supposed to flow. These are how these components fit together. This is how it fits together from their vantage point. And that is something I would say it's broken out into challenges, objectives, work plan, and then the budget. And if you really just try to look at the through line between those concepts, it it becomes a little bit more manageable and a little bit more bite-sized and graspable. Like, what are the challenges? Well, outline them. Then what are your objectives? You tie that back to the challenges you listed. And then what is the work plan? Well, you tie that back to the objectives. It even says which objective are you trying to accomplish in this set of your work plan sort of steps. And then the budget finally ties back to what the expenses are for the objectives. And it sounds so easy to say, and it's very hard when you're looking at the 35-page document. Um, but when you read it over and over, don't it's okay. Let the intimidation wash over you for like a minute, but just know that it is manageable and it is doable, and it's not as impenetrable as it seems on the first read.
That's great. Yeah, that's helpful advice, I think. So applying this year, have you altered your project in any significant way?
Yes, actually, maybe like medium significance. I think that what the feedback has shown me is where some of the weaknesses were. Um, there are also some things I've learned even since last year that I would like to recalibrate and reevaluate. I think that the main focus will be the same. Is that again we're here at this community park. There's so many untapped potential benefits at this park um, that I think could really both transform our market and the park and the community as a whole. And so I just want to. So the overall concept will be that again the title was taking root at the Gettysburg Rec Park, and I still think that will be the main focus. But I have new ideas again with the feedback from the USDA and just my own further development of the ideas that I think will make it hopefully a stronger proposal, and hopefully we'll see a funded proposal at the end of the day.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And I know that you're looking at other financing mechanisms to accomplish some of the things that you want to do. Have you been able to make any progress on your plan, given that you haven't gotten funded outside funding yet? Can you do any of it from internal financing?
Oh yeah, yeah. So oh yeah, I do like to write grants. So I've actually written about maybe 9 grants this year. The end of last year into this year. Some airing on the very complicated and some airing on the one or two page proposals of various amounts. Again, it's something I like to do. I find grant writing just I don't know. It feels more approachable than trying to solicit just pure donations or sponsorships and asking people. I guess with the grants is that there's an organization saying, we're going to give this money away to somebody, just write the best thing and we'll give it to the best, most deserving candidate. Whereas the sponsorships, it's more like, um, we may or may not, but you have to sort of have that personal connection. I'm not a very personable person, Kat, if you can't tell.
You're a
Uh,
very personable person. You do a great job. Um, so just kind of wrapping up, any tips or advice that you'd give to other folks embarking on this now?
sure. One piece of this is kind of an example of me needing to take my own advice, but what I've heard is very helpful. I have not done it myself, but I do plan to do it as soon as I can. Maybe not in this round, but soon. Is you can also apply to be a USDA FMPP grant reviewer.
Yeah, I've seen
And
that. That has gotten me curious myself a few times.
yeah, I think, and in fact, the woman I mentioned, Kathy Glon, was a grant reviewer, and I think that gave her some really helpful insight. So if you apply to be a grant reviewer, first and foremost, they do give you some small stipend. I don't think it's not worth in terms of like the actual hours spent. It's not, I wouldn't call it a living wage, but it does give you that insight. In fact, if you are thinking about applying, but maybe the timeline is too tight for 2026, maybe now is your time to apply to be a grant reviewer, be part of that process, see what other proposals are coming through, and use that again to familiarize yourself with the template, familiarize yourself with the process, see what these conversations are like on the back end, and then that will help inform and inspire you in your own actual application, maybe in the next round. Again, I have not done this, but I think it is worthwhile, and I should do this, and I would like to do this at some point soon. And again, it seemed to be successful for people on our team. Um, Another tip that I would throw out there. This sounds so silly, I guess, but you really want to cultivate a sense. This sounds so silly, but you really want to cultivate a sense of what constitutes a beautiful document. What a grant writer thing to say, because the USDA, they do provide a template, and you're not supposed to change that template, and you shouldn't. You should follow the template as it is. But even in the template, there is some latitude. What do you bold? What do you italicize? What do you bullet? And you really want to make a document that is easy to read visually and easy to capture the most relevant and pertinent information in a digestible and uh, kind of visually compelling way. Because think again, if you're a grant reviewer, I believe this is the case that there are teams of people and the team get 10 grants to review. I think that's how it works. So at the very least, that's about approximately 10 grants. If each one is 35 pages, that's 350 pages. So they're reading a lot of stuff. So you want yours to stand out and not be like a wall of pure text. That's just
I think
like,
that's actually you say it's silly, but I think that's a very valuable tip because, yeah, as a reviewer, about that third grant and you're 100 and some pages in, you're pretty tired of that gray and white operation.
yes, exactly. Even okay, here's a little tip. Here's a little tip for everybody. Again, I don't know if this actually works or not. Again, this is not USDA sanctioned advice. But you follow the template that they provide. Don't change the template. Use the template. But within that template, even their own template has various colored tables embedded. And so you can also add tables or add strategic color. I wouldn't like make it rainbow colored, but I think you can use strategic like to just to make a heading of a table a light blue instead of gray. And just those little things, I think, make it a more visually digestible document. And I think that goes a little bit of a long way in this type of process. Uh, another tip I would throw out there is this is true of all grants, but it's worth thinking about is um, use the language that is provided by the awarding agency and by the template itself. And if that means sort of translating your own ideas into what they are calling it, um, do that. For instance, if it says outline your objectives, then say, our first objective is to do this. Don't call it a goal. Don't call it a achievement, or don't call it a hope or whatever they say, just call it that and be like, this is what you're calling it, and so this is what we're going to call it too. Similarly, getting more specific into the language, I'm sort of forgetting exact terms. I don't want this to be not verbatim, but like if you call your vendors growers, or if you call them vendors even, I think the USDA, they prefer the term farmers and ranchers. They use farmers, ranchers, and maybe a third thing that I'm forgetting, agricultural commodities or whatever. So whatever language they're using, don't call them vendors, call them farmers and ranchers. Every time you use the word vendor, just take it out, put farmer and rancher as appropriate, as appropriate. So whatever term that they are giving you, translate your own data and your own concepts into that format. I think that goes a long way to really aligning yourself with what the grant is asking.
I think that's really important. We see it too in like HR. We've recommended to people looking for jobs, be sure you translate those words right back to them. And the other thing that helps, and I'm not sure that USDA has AI screeners working, but I think they do. So, and I think that happened a lot with the grants that were terminated. They were screening all of those grants for the words that they had now decided were not worthy of funding. And I'm sure they're using that same kind of system to do an initial screening on the grant applications that come in. So if you're using their words, I'm going to guess, and again, along with Reza, I am not a USDA sanctioned advisor for how to write a grant, but I will bet that will help you get into whatever the next step is in evaluating those grants.
I think so too. And actually, on that point, one last thing I would say is I myself am a big AI skeptic. I am not a super huge fan. I think for a lot of reasons.
Same.
Maybe we can all, yeah. But it can be a useful time-saving tool. It can help you. I did use ChatGPT a little bit through my process, but the one final tip I would say is really strive to rehumanize the language that you use. Do not just copy and paste it into the grant application. Really comb through. It can help give you the first draft, but it is not. I mean, it will never be a final product. At least in the current iteration that I've been using and I think are pretty popular. So really strive to rehumanize your language as you're developing your application.
Yeah, I think that's important too. I think ChatGPT is making us all dumber. Like, hopefully, the more intelligent application will rise to the top. We can all cross our fingers on that one. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Did we not ask you something we should have?
No, I'm really, this is kind of like a long time listener, first time caller situation, except even more than a caller. I'm glad to be a part. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm glad to have this conversation. And I wish everybody luck out there. It's worth the process. It is, again, the FMPP program. There's no greater source of funding for farmers markets out there than this opportunity. So I would love to see. I mean, all in the shared goal of advancing farmers markets across the country. I would like to see this funding implemented as successfully as possible, and I wish everybody luck in striving for it.
Yeah, absolutely. We would really like to see the percentage of grants that go to actual farmers market organizations. And, a lot of that grant money went to great organizations that are doing good things, that are sort of aligned with many of our core goals of helping farmers and helping people eat more healthily and creating more income for producers. But a lot of them this last couple of years have not gone to farmers markets, and we would love to see that percentage shift. So get out there, tackle that template, see if you can get some of that money that the government's giving away. Thanks for being with us today, Reza. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you, Kat. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening today. And big thanks to Manage My Market for making farmers market managers' lives easier with a user-friendly online platform that makes it simple to manage vendor processes and mapping all in one place. And for supporting Tent Talk, the farmers market podcast. For more information, click the Manage My Market logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Thanks for listening to Tent Talk today. Please leave us a review on your podcast app or wherever you listen to Tent Talk. Let us and others know how you're enjoying the podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Tent Talk. Connect with fellow farmers market folks in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community, and follow us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros. Find online education and other resources at farmersmarketpros.com. Tent Talk is brought to you by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Tent Talk is hosted by Kat Fields White and Bridget Myers and produced by Leandra Hayes, with original music by David Mead. Tune in for another great episode.